Hey, everybody, welcome back to another daily drop here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And of course, if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, that is Tar Heel Illustrated. If you're just a YouTube consumer of our stuff, head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com. We have a lot of free content there. A lot of free content that you'll find very, very interesting, but we also have a lot of premium content, not just front page articles, but message board content. We post a ton of stuff there. We track a lot of things in recruiting. It's all in a one-stop shop for you right there. You don't have to go searching around for stuff. We have it all, plus a great deal of inside intel about recruiting, about the portal, about the football Tar Heels, the basketball Tar Heels, and tremendous dialogue with our many, many subscribers on our growing site. So make sure you're going over there, become a member. It's just $8.33 a month for a 1-year sub. That's it. That's the price of a number one drive-through pretty much anywhere, even the low-end fast food joints. That's about what it costs. So skip one of those once a month, and it pays for THI, and it helps us continue to do what we're doing, because if you didn't know, we go where the Tar Heels go. We cover every football game, every basketball game, no matter where they are. We are there, and I'm pretty much at all of them. Unless there's a football, basketball conflict, I'm there. So anyway, today's topic, we're going to stay on Carolina basketball. I'm recording this before the national championship game Monday night between UConn and Purdue is played, so I don't know the result as I'm doing this. If I did know in advance, I'd lay down a few bucks and probably have an amazing, even more amazing site. I could hire all my staff and would triple the salary, and we would be the most dynamic thing on the planet. But that's not the case. So that game has not been played yet. I anticipate a pretty good game. I'm not going to say much more because I could look foolish right now, since all of you watching this already know what happened in the game. So Monday's drop was about Carolina's history playing in the national championship game, sort of a way to soothe over the fact that I think a lot of Carolina fans not too thrilled over the last week with Duke going further, with NC State's run to the Sweet 16 and all the love it got, and Carolina's, lost in the Sweet 16. Duke went to the Elite Eight, lost to State. State, of course, Final Four. Carolina went to the Sweet 16. So it's been a tough week for Carolina fans. So I gave them a lot of good stuff to feel a little bit better. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank the 5 UNC basketball teams that I have personally covered in national championship games. I've covered 5 of them that have involved Carolina: 05, 09, 16, 17, and 22. I've been there for all of them. And I can tell you that this is not easy. It's not as easy as some people think. These are all very different, very unique teams. I think 5's pretty easy for a lot of people. 1 might be pretty easy, but 2, 3, and 4, you could think about it a lot because they're such different teams. You could say 1 might be a little bit more talented than the other, but that may have been a more well-rounded team, maybe a better rebounding team. Whatever the case may be, I'm going to roll it out right now. I'd love to know what you guys think about my 1 through 5 once I reveal it. I'd also want to know what yours is. Of these 5, you don't have to have been there like I was there. I just kind of wanted to use that as the basis of ranking these 5. These aren't the 5 best teams during this period, because the 2022 team that played for the national title, it's not as good as a 2012 team that didn't play for the national title, or 2008, or 2007, or 2019, and so on. So we're just sticking to the 5 that have played in title games this century, and I also happen to have covered all 5 games, covered those 5 teams a lot. So let me know what your 1 through 5 with these clubs is as well. So I'm going to begin with number 5, counting from 5 to 1, 2022, obviously, but that was a fun group once they got it going. That was a team that grabbed the heartstrings of Carolina fans at a time that was absolutely needed. They're going to go down as a very important group because you had the Cam Johnson, Luke May, Kobe White team in 19. They got sick. Guys were throwing up in the locker room. I'll never forget Cam Johnson throwing up, and we're doing post-game interviews in the locker room. Never saw him, but I heard him. And they lost to Auburn in the Sweet 16. That's a club that very well could have gotten to a Final Four. Would have met up with UVA in a Final Four. Never know what would have happened with that team. But then you had 20, just 14 and 19. You had 21, the COVID year, the only Roy team to ever lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Then he retires. Then you have Hubert, and that club wasn't very good in the regular season. They got blown out every once in a while. They looked really bad at times. And there were a lot of people concerned about the future of the program. But that club beat K in his last home game and then ended his career in the Final Four and had a 15-point lead at halftime and just ran out of gas. And Hubert has acknowledged many times he thought that was the only time that team got tired. Perhaps he would do things differently now than he did then. Who knows? Doesn't matter. It's done. It's in the books. But that team gave people something to love and get emotional about. The roar every time Brady Manick is on the video board when he says, "I'm Brady Manick and I'm a Tar Heel." Those kinds of things are important for a fan base like this. And that group, even though it wasn't a very good team throughout the year, gave them that in an amazing run, a little comparable to what NC State here did, but it was a better team than NC State here in the recent run. So 2022 is number 5. Number 4, this is going to be a little bit tougher. Number 4, I'm going with 2016, in part because they didn't win it. Some people think 16 was better than 17 because 16 had Marcus Page and Bryce Johnson, who was awesome that year as a senior. 17 didn't have those two, but they had a much better version of Kennedy Meeks. They had a much better version of Justin Jackson, who was ACC Player of the Year, a much better version of Joel Berry, a much better version of Isaiah Hicks. They had Tony Bradley off the bench. They had Luke May starting to come into his own, which wasn't the case in 16. So I say 16 is the 4th team, the number 4 team of the 5 that I've covered in national championship games. And they nearly got to an overtime. If Jenkins' shot doesn't fall, if maybe it's defended a little bit differently with forcing Archie DNR, I'm going to butcher his name, I always do. Force him to catch the ball coming to the baseline. That extra split second could have been the difference. Maybe that game goes to overtime. The way Marcus Page played the last several minutes of regulation probably would have given Carolina a little bit of an edge going into overtime. Didn't work out that way. Jenkins' shot went in. It was a beautiful, beautiful play. And the Tar Heels lost, and they had the fuel for redemption for the following year. Now, staying with 16, I will never forget sitting courtside on the sideline when they played Providence in the second round in Raleigh. And to this day, a ball comes at me. I'm thinking it's a block shot by Bryce Johnson. He was awesome in that game. The other thing I remember about this team was the locker room after the game. Whenever I bring someone onto my staff, especially someone young who doesn't have a whole lot of experience in doing this for a living, I always tell them that, the most human experience I've ever had in this profession, and I'm in my 28th year, is going into the locker room of a team that just lost in the NCAA tournament 15 minutes after the game ends. That's when the locker room's supposed to open for NCAA mandate. That locker room in 2016 in Houston, when I walked in, I could hear 2 players, weeping and trying to console each other. They weren't in view at the time. They were kind of off toward the shower area. It was Kennedy Meeks and it was Bryce Johnson. And it was a remarkable, remarkable moment because Bryce then came out and sat in a seat toward the back of the locker room. And it was just a chair. It wasn't up against a locker, which is usually the case. It was like Bryce's chair. He was going to hold court there with the media. And he sits down and he wasn't ready to talk. And I was there waiting. And I remember waiting a few minutes and some other people were coming up and everyone just kind of giving him his space, not even standing right where we would when we normally do interviews. He was very, very upset. It was very touching. We still have the video on our channel. You could see it, Tar Heel Illustrated on YouTube. You can go search back and find it, some of the interviews from that night. But it was an amazing moment of emotion from Bryce, and he handled the questions well. And then a little while later, I remember talking to Kennedy Meeks in the locker room and I asked him about Bryce, and he just lost it. Because Bryce meant so much to him, and he felt bad that they didn't get a title for Bryce and Marcus and Joel James, who was a senior at the time as well. But I remember those things so vividly, and I always will. And I like sharing the story because I want everyone who does this for a living or even part-time, who is in media in some capacity and takes it seriously. I would love for them to have that kind of experience, because fans love to bitch and moan and blame guys for this and blame guys for that. But when you walk in one of those locker rooms, like I did in Los Angeles a week and a half ago, and you talk to those kids and you see the emotion, you see how important it is. And I tell people all the time, it matters a lot more to those kids than it does to anybody watching. As important as it is to Carolina fans, as passionate as they are, as emotional as they get, it means more to those kids. And that night was one of those nights where it was another layer of understanding for me just how important, just how emotional this sport can be. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I will never forget it. I wish I could take Jacob and Bryant and everybody on my staff back in time into that locker room so they can experience it as well. The third team going 5-4-3 is going to be 2017. Now, 2017 and 2005, they play each other. Be great series, number one. They're different kinds of teams. But the 2017 team reminded me a lot of the 93 team, Dean's second national title team, where maybe not a lot of great players, but a lot of really, really good ones who were a great unit. And you had role players that came off the bench, the Nate Britts of the world, that understood what their role was and did it really well. And you had guys who stepped up and were big at times. Justin was really good all year, but Kennedy Meeks in the Final Four against Oregon, I think he went 25-12, unbelievable. But also Isaiah Hicks was terrible that game and was, I think, affected by it. He didn't like answering questions the next day about it, the day before the national title game against Gonzaga. But Isaiah played really well against Gonzaga, hit that big double pump shot off the glass inside the last minute, maybe about 45 seconds left, and he was big that night. That club found ways to win and had a lot of different dudes that had huge parts in them winning that title. Luke in Memphis against Butler and obviously Kentucky. People remember the shot, but he was the MOP. Go look at his numbers against Butler and then against Kentucky. He was the MOP of the region. And of course, Joel Berry was the MOP of the Final Four. Theo Pinson was the engine that always could and did. A fun team to cover, a smart team, good group of guys that were asked a lot of unfair questions by the media about the AFAM situation that was still hanging over the school. And these were guys that had nothing to do with it. And they certainly were more than outstanding representatives of the program and the school. And I think some of Roy's best coaching, getting those teams to play at the level they did. And I say those teams because 16 was the first leg of what 17 did. The fourth team is 2005. That was Roy's first title, his second year. And that was a group that they had a motor in 2005. I still say to this day, Roy's greatest coaching achievement was getting Rashad McCants on the same page as everybody else and keeping him there for the stretch run of that season so that club could win a title. Rashad was an amazing player. No doubt about it. Beautiful shot, so much talent, so much skill. Strange guy, I got to admit. He was hard to deal with from a media standpoint. And some people stopped dealing with him during that season because he was difficult. But he was a phenomenal player. And Roy did a masterful job getting Rashad McCants to be a square peg in a square hole for that team. And it worked because without doing that, I don't think they win the national title. But they do it, and Rashad was outstanding. Sean May was incredible. The last 2.5, 3 months of that season, he was as good as I've seen from a North Carolina big man that I've covered. Raymond Felton just is as gritty and hard-nosed point guard as Carolina's had that I've covered. And a dude who was very passionate, and I will never forget the embrace he had with Michael Jordan right outside the locker room after that title game. I was standing right outside the locker room waiting to go in for interviews, and you had Dean and MJ right there. And when Raymond saw MJ, he ran up to him. They had a big embrace, and obviously MJ had some words of advice for Raymond, and Raymond was telling him that, hey, you were right. You were right. That was a pretty cool moment. Like I said earlier, Jawad Williams, Melvin Scott, Jackie Manuel, seeing them go through 8-20 and seeing them go through the following year, which was just a lot of difficult things those kids dealt with and fought through, but stuck around. Today, they all would have bolted in the portal, but they stuck around. They got titles. And that's a cool thing. Jackie's line in the Final Four, the semifinals and title game, I think it was 0 points and 9 fouls and 1 ring. And that's what he cares about. And he was a defensive dynamo. He had the right attitude that permeated that team. And of course, he had a great player like Marvin Williams coming off the bench. And 2009 is number 1. That is, I don't know if I would say that's the last great college basketball team. 2012, Kentucky was really good. 2015, Kentucky was phenomenal, but they didn't win it all. I think to be great, you got to win it all. Before Monday night, Purdue UConn, because I'm recording this before that title game, I'll say that 2009 might be the last great college basketball team. They blitzed through the field. They beat Michigan State that year twice in Ford Field and blew them out both times. They beat them, I think, in the challenge, in the ACC Big Ten Challenge at Ford Field in early December, and then just blitzed them in the title game. It was a no contest. Dick Vitale used to scream, "It's an NC, baby, no contest." It was no contest. The Tar Heels destroyed them. Ty Lawson was outstanding that year, ACC Player of the Year. Wayne Ellington was the MOP. Danny Green was fantastic. Marcus Ginyard didn't play that year because he was injured. He got injured in the fall, took a red shirt, actually played the next year on the team that ended up missing the NCAA tournament. That was the Larry Drew team. And that was an interesting year, to say the least. 2009, phenomenal team. I would put 2009 up against 82 just to see how. I wish we have so much amazing technology and AI and all that kind of crap. I wish there was a way where we could almost, with that, have them play. 82 was fantastic, obviously. Great starting 5. MJ, Worthy, Perkins. Not a great bench. 2009 had NBA guys on the bench. Tyler Zeller got a ring. Ed Davis has a ring. Drew was on that team. He played in the NBA. That club is phenomenal, loaded, a lot of fun, a lot of characters. That's a group that had some interesting dudes for sure. Bobby Frazier as a backup. Here's what's interesting, by the way. Here's what's really, really interesting about Roy's 3 titles is he had backup point guards who were seniors, 2 of whom had previously started quite a bit. Bobby Frazier was a starting point guard as a freshman. He was a backup as a senior. Nate Britt started snippets for a couple of years. He was the backup as a senior, and he was huge in, I believe it was the Arkansas game, as they got past Arkansas in the tournament. So I mean, that may have been the year before in 16, but nevertheless, Roy had mature teams. 2009 was mature when you have a guy like Frazier as your backup point guard, and you have all the talent that group had, and you had the utter determination to destroy teams. The Tyler Hansbrough destruction mindset. That club had it. They did it in the tournament, won every game by double figures or more, and annihilated Michigan State in the national championship game. So I know I went really long on this, but I wanted to and have some fun. And those are the 5 UNC teams that I've covered in national championship games. Ranking 5-1, once again, very quickly. 2022 is number 5. 2016 is number 4. 2017 is number 3. 2005 is number 2. 2009, number 1. Tell me what you think. If you disagree, tell me. If you agree, tell me. Nobody's right. Nobody's wrong. It's all subjective, guys. So let me know what y'all think. And we'll have some fun with some discourse either on Facebook, here on Twitter, or Twitter X, whatever you call it. I still call it Twitter, or on our message boards. Let's hear what you guys have to say. I'm AJ, and I appreciate you stopping by.